WJR.
Chuck, I've said a number of times, and you may have said the same thing, that what we've just gone through or are going through with automotive wasn't the cycle that those of us who grew up in the area, growing up in Monroe, I'd watch the cycle, okay, and also I'd watch, okay, so now they're in the barrel, GM, or now Ford's in the barrel, or now Chrysler, and then they go through the cycle and they come out and everything would be okay. We're not in a cycle. It's not a cycle that we just came through in automotive. I hope and pray that this is a cycle, though, what's happening throughout the United States. However, I've also felt with the weakening of the dollar and people thinking that's not a big deal because it does help some people, like the automotives, like cars selling in other countries. I've been very concerned about this talk of us, the U.S., not being the superpower that we once were. And some people were saying, well, 25 years from now, 50 years from now, I'm looking at next year and the year after that, and I'm concerned. Are my concerns, Chuck, from your standpoint, Conway, MacKenzie, and Dunleavy, are they well-grounded or well-founded concerns?
Well, I think absolutely. One of the areas that we've really expanded our practice in is in the international area. A lot of the companies that we deal with, and over the last few years, there's been a substantial amount of M&A activity, mergers and acquisition activity. And we've dealt with a lot of private equity funds. The majority of these funds have some sort of international aspect to them because people are recognizing that really the demand on a global basis is not driven entirely by the U.S. The U.S. is still a significant market that has to be addressed, but most companies are actually investing in areas outside of the U.S. And that is an area that when you look at that aspect, it really gives you cause for concern as to how much longer are people going to look at the U.S. as the major superpower. Again, also when you look at our currency and what has happened in relation to the other world currencies.
And that's frightening because though we like to think that we've been kind in wielding our power, there are a lot of countries that don't think we were so kind and so good about it, and they're not going to be in a hurry to help us. They might even be in a hurry to hurt us. And there are countries that are not our best friends as much as they should be because we're trading partners. And as David Littman always said, you never go to war with your customer. I'm not so sure that's the case when you start to think of the Chinese and the Russians who control so much in these United States. And if they decided to pull out of the dollar and pull out of their U.S. investments, we'd be in huge trouble. As an entrepreneur, let me ask you, Joe, some of your thoughts about some of the key attributes that you see that regardless of what the economy might be, that you see at successful companies.
Sure. And Paul W., one of the way we got to that answer was almost by mistake. I wish we were smarter than sometimes we believe we are. But, you know, a question was asked to me at an automotive news conference or an OESA event that basically said, what's the difference between what you do in a turnaround and healthy companies? And we really had to ponder for a little bit. But after we dove through it, there's really nothing. The good companies do exactly what we turnaround specialists do when we're called in to revive a company. The difference is they do it on their own accord. They do it every single day. It's ingrained in their philosophy. And there basically are 4 or 5 different things they do. They challenge everything they do every single day. They don't wake up one day without challenging what they did the day before. They treat everything like it's a war because we are at war. They understand daily metrics. They know the things that tell them they did a good job or a bad job every day, and they understand their supply chain. They realize that they're only one piece of a large puzzle. And that really is exactly what we as restructuring or turnaround specialists do when we go in. It's just now we have the reins to go do it on a hyper-speed event versus a good company that does it every single day.
And that's, and you know, when you're doing that, and that's a good point, Joe, you want, David, your bank to be your partner in a sense. You have to rely on your bank to help you. But that's tough for you because then you're standing by somebody who's telling you, okay, here's what we're doing now. We promise we're going to be better. We promise it's going to work. We promise you're not going to lose, your money. That's a tough one for you.
It is a tough one for banks, and we tend to find the companies that are really well run. Those companies are give us the least headache, obviously. When we find ourselves in a situation where we have a customer that's hit one of these speed bumps and we engage Whitehall or Conway, MacKenzie or some others to go in and help these folks with their turnaround or restructuring plan, we pay very close attention. We're in constant communication with the turnaround folks. And at least at National City, we try really, really hard to help our customers get through this and not just throw them out of the bank. That's why we have such good relationships with firms like these. And because ultimately it's in our best interest as a financial institution to see our customer come out of this on the other side a better performing entity. And we've had some great success with that. So it is challenging though, because we spend you know, a lot of time on the phone with Joe and Chuck and their counterparts, and our lenders are constantly engaged with these clients who are struggling, and you know, sometimes they make it, sometimes they don't, right?
Sure.
And Paul W., I think to your earlier point, you asked one of the questions about, you know, the perfect storm. We traditionally had some stability in the banking business so that, you know, firms like Conway and ourselves can work with these institutions. Today, with the instability in the banking situation, not only nationally but here locally, there isn't a lot of places to run. Some banks do have an attitude of, I'm sorry, the speed bump you hit is now your exit strategy. National City is not in that mode. They've worked with us and with their clients and with clients moving from other institutions. And I think that's another piece that the local person out there is just struggling, because the bank that was always their best friend all of a sudden looks a lot different than they did a month ago.
Very good point, Joe Bione from the Whitehall Group. Let me ask Chuck Moore, Senior Managing Director of CM&D, Conway, MacKenzie, and Dunleavy. Given what we've just heard and what we're talking about, what should a struggling company do? What should their approach be for a rapid improvement program? How would they approach that? How would you recommend to your clients how a struggling company should approach a rapid improvement program?
Well, the first thing that we always focus on, whether it's in today's environment or historically, is always liquidity. Get your arms around your liquidity situation as soon as possible. And basically, by liquidity, I'm referring to the amount of cash that the company has available to it. Typically, the companies that we get involved with are losing money, but that's not to say that they don't have access to financial resources. And any turnaround requires funding to get through it. And so the very first thing that we try to do is to understand how much liquidity the company has, and then secondly, we look at what the short-term cash burn may be. How much cash are they going to lose? And we start to take steps that will immediately address that. Usually it's going to revolve around either immediate cost cuts or some sort of asset sales. Asset sales are one of the areas that a lot of companies tend to ignore. And in today's environment, it may not be very easy to do that. But if you look at underutilized assets and you can free up cash in that way, you can really help fund your turnaround quite significantly.
And we've heard a lot of that, and we've, you know, people say they're going to pare down and get back to the basics and all of that. Some of it doesn't make sense to me, because some of it sounds, the things they get rid of, it always seems to me like it would have been a good thing to hang on to. And one of my traditional favorites is, I think it makes sense for an auto manufacturer to own a car rental company. It just seems like what a good thing that would be, because you can put your cars into these lots and into people's hands. Now, they'd have to change that, because the stripped down versions are a ridiculous way for us to advertise our product. That's why people get into they get out of their Toyota Camry at home and have to rent a car, and they get into a Taurus at a rental place that's been stripped down, almost doesn't have carpet, and they go, what a piece of junk this is. Those Americans, I'm glad I got, you know. And I've said till I'm blue in the face, it's like my one-man campaign, put loaded American cars there. And lose a little money there, because you're trying to get people to drive these cars anyway. Let them drive the best car going, and they're paying to do that. And they're, in a broader sense, I thought that owning rental car companies would be good, but the car companies did and got rid of them or something, right? I mean, over the years, they've owned them and gotten rid of them.